Yes, again, we have a bunch of great questions. The main one is on healthy diets or healthy foods in the 18th century. Thanks for joining us today on Questions and Answers with James Townsend and Son. Bob Adams asks in the donut episode that we did, was that the 2-quart or the 5-quart pot that you used for frying the donuts? Whenever we're working with something as big as the donuts, or like when we did the fried chicken or the fritters, we use the 5-quart pot. It's just about the right size for that kind of food. The 2-quart pot probably would bubble over too much. It's just not big enough. Their 2-quart pots are great for small stews, but not really big enough to fry in. This one's from Michael. It's the Lobscouse episode, and he says, in the 18th century, would they have eaten the biscuits that had worms? Aside from being gross, did the worms actually cause a problem? I think that if anything, they would increase the protein content. Well, I think anyone would be disturbed about having worms in their food. So, did they cause problems? Undoubtedly, to a certain extent. But if you didn't have any choice, if that's all the food you had, you ate it anyway. So I think really that's the case there. That like most of the time on board ship, that's the situation where you're going to have wormy biscuits. That if you had biscuits that didn't have worms, you're going to use those first, and you're going to use the wormy ones later. But when that's all you have, that's what you're going to eat. This question is from the chicken salad episode that we just did. This is Veronica Diamond. She says, 18th century spaghetti? Well, I haven't seen any references to anything quite like 18th century spaghetti, especially with something like a tomato sauce. Tomato sauces, at least for, say, the English and the Americans or North Americans, they're not going to like a tomato-based sauce, at least very often. So you're not going to see that. Now, when it comes to pasta, especially vermicelli, was imported into England and into North America. Sometimes you'll see references to macaroni also. I haven't seen anything that probably pointed to something quite like a spaghetti pasta, but it's possible. Here's a great question that came out on the Pemmican episode, and that's been getting a lot of traffic here lately. Probably somebody on Reddit. Sir Fish Slayer, can/should pemmican be stored in vacuum-sealed bags, or does it need to breathe? Well, sort of the essence of pemmican is that it's sealed from the air. All that suet is coating the dried meat product, and it is kind of trying to seal it in the first place. And when it was originally made, it was made in leather bags that were coated with this suet, and that was sealing it from the air. So I would say, yes, seal it. Vacuum sealed bags, probably one of the best ways to store it for the long term. Here's another one that came in on the chicken salad episode. This one's the cynical Luddite. Is there an alternative for mustard, or leave it out completely? Unfortunately, I cannot eat mustard. Well, you could leave it out completely. If you're looking for something that can act as a bit of an emulsifier, like the mustard does in here, you could say take the yolks of hard-boiled eggs, maybe just one yolk, and mash it up into a paste and mix that in with the dressing, and that will help emulsify it if you want that kind of effect, or you could just leave it out. Another one on the chicken salad one. This one's Art Fluids. Thank you for all you do. This recipe looks great. Would a little bit of sugar in the dressing be appropriate for the time period? This particular recipe did not have sugar in it, but some of the other dressing recipes do add a little bit of sugar. So yes, it would be appropriate to add some sugar to this dressing in the time period. Here's an interesting question that came in on the chicken salad episode. It's Animal16365. The question is, what were the 3 most common ways of cooking? Or should I ask, the preferred ways of cooking? Let's just say their cooking methods were definitely different from what we use most often today. Boiling meat was very popular in the 18th century, and likely for several different reasons. probably the kind of cooking equipment that they most likely would have had. Everyone had some kind of a pot to boil their meat in, but they may not have an oven to bake their meat in, or they may not have some of the same kind of tools to do it other ways. And they were also concerned about, I believe, about losing some of the quality there, especially in a lower, I'll say class setting, where they didn't want to lose any of the food value. They would boil that meat, and then they had both the meat and then they had the water to make a soup, and they could use it later on. So for sort of economic reasons, they would boil quite often. But you still see, of course, roasting and baking and things like that going on in the 18th century. Here's a quick one. This one's from Dr. John. It's on the chicken salad, and he says, "Where's the nutmeg?" I'll bet you a little bit of nutmeg would have worked out just fine in there. This one's interesting. It's on the mushroom ketchup episode. This one's Tammy Shrinks. How do I dry the mushrooms? Do I just let them sit? Well, they definitely are going to need more than just letting them sit. They probably go yucky. I would just put them on a baking sheet and spread them out so they're light, not kind of bunched together, but spread all out, and put on the oven on its lowest setting, maybe 200 degrees. You could also put them in a dehydrator. That should work too. This one's from the last Q&A. This is Jokel Ford. Hey, you have a lot of videos on different kinds of bread and leavening. I have seen them all, great videos. In one of the videos you mentioned that bread was very important, that they were dependent on bread, but it got me wondering, how would they eat the bread? Did they use it in further cooking? Did they eat it with toppings like we do now, or like ham and cheese? Keep up the good work. They used bread in any number of different ways. They may have even eaten it in sandwich-like situations, probably not as popular as it is today, but you'd see a little bit of that in the 18th century. But they would eat it on its own. They would cook it. They would put cheese on it or butter on it. They would do great things like that. They would use chicken or bread crumbs in all kinds of different recipes. So bread was used in a multitude of different manners. Here's a good one. It would take a long time to answer this, but I'm going to answer it very shortly. This is Laura Jean Russin. I love the Q&As. Thank you, John. I have a question on today's questions. What is flint corn? Flint corn is a more primitive version of corn, or should I say primitive version? Let's just say it's the variety that you would more likely find, or that you would find in the 18th century, versus what we see today many times, which is dent corn. Dent corn is a corn that has a much softer outside shell, more starch on the inside, and it was a corn variety that was developed in the mid-19th century, say, the 1850s or so. And it sort of took over what we see as field corn today. It's all dent corn. But in the 18th century, that kind of field corn would have been flint corn. And it's similar to what we would say would look like popcorn. Popcorn is kind of its own variety, but it's a kind of flint corn. There's also sweet corn, which is different from both of those. So there are several different kinds, but, like around here, you see fields and fields of corn. It's all dent corn. It's all 19th century development. Here's the main question of the day. Yes, I'm finally here. It's on the chicken salad episode, and the username here is "Help, I'm trapped in the 18th century." That's a great username. James Townsend, a huge fan. Do you have any idea if the people in the 18th century were health conscious at all, or they had health concerns? Were there any recipes that would be considered healthy even by today's standards? Or was it that they worked and had so much physical activity that it hardly mattered? My son Donald Chu wants to know. Yeah, really good question. And there's a lot of kind of nuances to it, and it might not be easy to answer in this kind of a setting, but they were certainly concerned about their health and food specifically, and how that interacted with it. And just a simple kind of idea there with that is, if you get a cookbook, like most of the cookbooks in the 18th century, the back quarter of it They're all remedies. They're all medicine. So medicine and food, they're kind of going together. And there's a medical thought earlier on in the 15th, 16th, 17th century that had to do with hots and colds and balancing them in your diet and in your medicine. So they definitely connected food and health and healthy foods, but also going to your point here about physical activity, they did not have to concern themselves nearly as much about exactly what they ate because they didn't have as much food as we have. We have this giant abundance of food, and so they wouldn't eat as much of the bad stuff as we might have. And they certainly didn't have the same number of processed foods, fast foods, junk foods that we have available to us today. They couldn't afford them, and they just plain did not have them. They were not eating donuts every day. I can assure you of that. Oh, and a quick shout out to Cynthia Bertelson. She's got this blog called gherkinstomatoes.com. And it's got a lot of historic food type articles in it. There's a lot of great documentation, and she occasionally shares some of our work. So I really want to thank her for sharing our videos or our content. And if you're interested in 18th century cooking and you're looking for some more information, other places to find information, make sure to check out her blog. I'll put a link down in the description section. And here's a very last minute announcement. I just kind of done this on the spur of the moment. Some of us are heading down to the Jane Austen Festival down in Louisville, Kentucky this Saturday. We'll just be down there hanging out and down there meeting people. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. I haven't been down there before, but the website looks great, and we thought we would head down and check that out. So if you happen to be in the area or you're going to that, make sure to look for us. And before I go, I do want to encourage anybody who's interested in living history or just learning a little bit more about what it is to do the reenacting thing. We do have that really interesting Getting Started course, and it's free, simple. It's got some kind of what do we call them? Video podcasty things along with emails that go with that. You can sign up in the, I'll give you a link down in the description section. I want to thank everyone for all your amazingly great questions. I have so many questions, and they're all so good that I can only pick just a few to do each week. But I want to thank you for those questions. So please keep them coming, and your great comments, and sharing our videos. Everything you do helps us, and I want to thank you so much for the support you give us. And thanks for watching. If you're a new viewer and you haven't subscribed, press the subscribe button up here. That'll take you to a spot where you can subscribe. I want to thank everyone for watching.